Because unfortunately, when we didn't deal with stormwater since the city's inception, so that put a lot of people, including the city, in a bad position. And so unfortunately, some of our HOAs and some of the other communities are having to deal with issues that maybe should have been mitigated a long time ago. And so I think what we might be able to do in Dillip High Five, we agree on something, grants, there is access to money. And so what we might need to do is say to some of the communities, say, Medlock Bridge, look, so here's what we're going to do. And again, I'm throwing figures out here. We're going to give each of the communities $100,000 to dredge up their retention ponds and repair any damage that's done. And we're going to only do that for the first couple years, just to kind of get everybody back on stable footing. And then after that, then you guys have kind of got to do what you need to do on your own. But I think we need to at least get to a position where we can get people back what they potentially have lost or put in, and go from there. But I think we need to, one, look at what the assessment is and what's coming in. And so even if we don't have the money in their current system, maybe we decide that one of the things that we do is we allow there to be an assessment on their property to say, here's what instead of you having to pay for that, we'll find out what the assessment is, what the damage is. And at least that takes that part off their plate to say, well, we'll tell you what the damage is and you can go out and source that. But we need to have a couple different options for these communities because, again, unfortunately, us kicking the can down the road has put a lot of communities at a disadvantage, and it's put a lot of financial burden on a lot of the communities. People have had to raise their HOA dues, and that's unfortunate because, again, we want to provide everybody the option to stay in this community where they can. But if we push people out because of the dues and everything else, that's unfortunate. So I think that we need to potentially meet in the middle if we don't have the funds in the budget to do it. But there are grants available, and so we need to take the opportunity to see what we can source and then how we can help these communities. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the performing arts. In the town centre, it's proposed to have a performing arts community centre built with a minimum cost of $52 million. It has been stated that even after the performing arts centre is open, it would require a minimum of 60% city funding annually to just keep the doors open. What is your position on the funding not only of the construction cost, but also the year-over-year cost to keep the centre open, as well as future maintenance costs?
I mean, I think first and foremost, we look at public-private partnerships and see what we can get from that. And then outside of that, the great thing about being the richest city in the state is that there are people here with funds, and there are people who would donate it to the arts. And so I think we need to look at all those possible options as a way to fund it. But outside of that, even when we're looking at potential maintenance fees and all of that, I know people are talking about a bond referendum. And if that's an opportunity, that's great, because the one great thing about a bond referendum is that all of you get to vote. And so nothing gets done without hearing from you and hearing your voices. And so I think that's something that we could potentially look at as a bond referendum to find out if the residents want it. Because again, if we vote on it and you guys want it, it will come. So I think that that's first and foremost, public-private partnerships, look at individual donors, and then what we can't cover or source in either a grant or some other outside opportunity, then we need to look at potentially a bond on it and allow the people and the residents to vote and see what they want to do.
Okay. Dylan. In the town centre, it is proposed to have a performing arts community centre built with a minimum cost of $52 million. It has been stated that even after the performing arts centre is open, it would require a minimum of 60% city funding annually to just keep the doors open. What is your position on the funding not only of the construction cost, but also the year-over-year cost to keep the centre open, as well as future maintenance costs?
Thank you, Anne. I serve on the Johns Creek Arts Center as a treasurer and executive board member. So in the last 2 years, even in the tough times, in the pandemic time, we had so much interest. The classes were full. There were people waiting to get enrolled. So there's a lot of demand for the arts. Yes, we need to have a legacy center in there. But when we're talking about the 60% city funding for the operations, let's not draw conclusions on that yet, because the task force of Legacy Center is working on economic study. Because there is a direct revenue from the rental of the space, and there's an indirect revenue. When people come to watch those concerts, they stay in the hotels, they spend in the restaurants, they dine, they shop. So there's an indirect income that comes into the city too. So So we need to look at both the buckets, direct and indirect, and then make a decision on what is the real funding. So public-private partnership, that's one thing that we got to look at it. The way it's going to happen is city has to definitely put in some funds into the legacy center. That way that we can attract the private investors. So how much and how we will work on those numbers. Once we have that economic study, we'll know exactly what is the legacy center is bringing into the Johns Creek. Okay? How much of more revenue that we haven't anticipated that's coming into the Johns Creek. It all comes back to what we talked about, shifting some of the tax burden from residents into the small business side. So yes, we need that one, but funding wise, let's wait for the complete economic study that's being done. Based on that, we'll make a decision on the next steps. Thank you.
Okay, changing gear once more. If elected, what are the top 3 things you want the City Council to tackle in January and why?
Good question. So the first one is going to be putting a framework for the town center. So we are there for 4 years. So we need to put in a right framework. Because my background from the construction, environmental engineering side, small business, real estate. So that helps me make a right decision to put a good framework where it's going to be public-private partnership. Within the city of the town center area that we are talking about, there are 47 private landowners. So city only owns very little of that area. So we need to come back with a proposition which is going to be the return on investment for the private investors to come back and invest in the city, in the town center. So the good framework matters. So that's what I'm going to work on as first step. The second one is going to be the stormwater. Yes, we already put in a framework and the current council has a utility fee. As I mentioned before, there are grants. I already forwarded all that information to the city staff. They're looking at it. For sure, next year we can apply for that. That's one grant, 400,000. If we can definitely tap into more like that, I would like to have the supplemental funding and expedite the process. That way we can come back and look at the second part of the question that Anne asked before, the homeowners. We don't want to put that burden on the homeowners of dredging and other aspects. Okay. So the third one is going to be the public safety. That's what we all focus on. That's the reason we are here. So we want to make sure that we provide all the tools and work with the chief and say, okay, what do we need? What can we do from the city council side? Because we all trust, we all work with the police department. So let's work with them and strengthen the department and make sure we are providing the tools to serve us better. Thank you.
Okay, Lee. If elected, what are the top 3 things you want the City Council to tackle in January and why?
So first I would say a small caveat. The first thing I would probably do is to build a relationship with my newfound council, because I think that that's important, because until you can work together as a group, nothing gets done. So first and foremost, I think you have to build that rapport with each other and figure out how to work together so that things get done and so that we're not just gridlocked consistently. But outside of that, town center. It has been long delayed and people want it, people are ready for it, people are itching for it. And so I think we have to give the people what they want. And it's part of that is not just the town center, but that having that Legacy Art Center be, kind of the anchor that pulls it all together. Because we're a community that, although we are very different, and although we have a lot of diversity, we are still very divided. We still kind of stay within our communities. And so we have to use the town center as a way to bring everybody together, to bridge the gap and bring us together as a community. So infrastructure, we talked about that. So stormwater, making sure that, again, we can put together our failing infrastructure to figure out where the gaps are, where the holes are, and figure out how to repair what's already been done. And obviously public safety is a big part of that. Our police, our fire, but it doesn't just stop there, but it's how do we keep our community safe? How are we keeping our kids safe? Is that, again, especially when we're dealing with COVID, are we doing the most that we can to make sure that people stay safe and that our numbers stay low in Johns Creek, and so that we can continue to be the best city? And so those are the 3 things that I would focus on, making sure that we had, our infrastructure, town center, and public safety. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk briefly about recycling. Can Johns Creek open a recycling centre like the one in Roswell?
I mean, absolutely, we can. We can open a recycling center just like Roswell has. I think it'd be great. We need to make sure that we're recycling. I mean, I think we need to do all that we can to lower our, carbon footprint and make sure that, we're providing the best opportunity for our children moving forward. Was there a two-part of that? What? The first? All right, well, I think that was easy.
So Dylan, can Johns Creek open a recycling centre like the one in Roswell?
Like one in Roswell, it's a big one. The Roswell one is a big one. It's been there for a long time. Yes, we can open a recycle center, but we need to look at where. The location is the biggest thing. Accessibility and where it can go. So there's a limited space in Johns Creek. So it's a good initiative to work on, but we need to evaluate the spaces available and make a decision on that one. Maybe not as big as the Roswell. Roswell is the biggest one. It's been there, so I would agree. We should, but let's look at the space where it can go.
So related but not quite, what will you do to reduce the negative environmental and financial impacts, such as air pollution and road damage, from the multiple trash collection trucks going through the same route around the city every week?
Very interesting question, because my background is in environmental engineering, so I used to design the air pollution equipments. Yes, that's a good thought, like multiple trash pickup trucks going through the city, going through the neighborhoods, it's going to have an impact on the streets and also the noise pollution. And we don't want the trash cans to be sitting out every day of the week. So yes, it's a good thought, but let's come back and get an input from the residents. Let's see what the City of Alpharetta is doing. They are working with Republic Services. So they don't in-source the whole thing. What they did is they worked contract with the Republic Services. So let's see how it works. Let's get an input from the residents. Let's talk to the City of Alpharetta, and even Peachtree Corners is doing that too. So let's talk to the neighboring cities and see how it's working out. Do we need to refine the process? So I would rather not bring the whole thing in-house, but work as a contract services with those waste management companies. So yes, it's a good idea, but there are a few steps that we need to follow before really implementing that. Thank you.
Okay, D. What would you do to reduce the negative environmental and financial impacts, such as air pollution and road damage, from multiple trash collection trucks going through the same routes around the city every week?
So it's definitely a problem. In my small community, we have, 6 homes, and we have 3 different trash pickups for 6 homes. 3. So, and they hit the gate every single time. Something always happens. And so I think this is a situation where we need to meet in the middle and maybe have some type of a hybrid situation where I don't necessarily think that especially because I would prefer for us, if we're going to bring things in-house, for it to be some other services first. So what I would like to see is maybe some type of a hybrid where we partner with Waste Management or BFI or something like that, where the city contracts it, but so it's not on the city to do any of the stuff, but again, it gives us better bargaining power. Especially, if we say, hey, that they didn't pick up something, it gives us the ability to do that, but it only has one service, and we can say, all right, the north side is on Monday, the middle goes on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and, so on and so forth until we get where we need to be. But I think that's an easy solution, is kind of being able to meet in the middle, so that the city isn't having to take on the responsibility, but that way we still only have one company that we're contracted with. And so I think that's a fair solution, is to probably do the best of both worlds, which is the city contracts with one particular company to get it done. And I think that's probably the best way. But again, it's something that we can look at.
Okay, I'm going to ask a very specific question and then end it with a general one. Peachtree Corners has many sidewalks on both sides of their streets. Barnwell and Nesbitt Road have just sporadic sections of sidewalks, and yet we have an elementary school and a national park on Barnwell. Brumbelow Road has sidewalks aplenty. Where are our sidewalks? When will we get sidewalks down Barnwell Road and down the city side of Nesbitt Ferry? And that's very specific. And more general, where do you see a need for more bike lanes and sidewalks?
Okay, so I think I'll deal with it in the reverse. So I think the places where I would like to see more bike lanes are from schools to parks, from parks to some of the schools. And so I think that that's the best place to have bike lanes, leading up to the schools and to the parks, so that families can ride together to the park to go have an activity, or kids can ride home from school to a park. So I think that's the best avenues for us to be able to do that. But as far as it relates to sidewalks, I totally agree we need more sidewalks. And they've got some construction coming down that is going to allow them to expand the sidewalks already, so it's coming. But I think we do need to find more resources to build the sidewalks, because it's still going to end at a particular spot. So it is very expensive for sidewalks. You wouldn't think that it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for a couple of feet of sidewalk, but it's expensive. And so I think we do need to make sure that we're building out the sidewalks there, but we have to figure out a way to do that. And right now I know that T-Splosh has some stuff that they're already doing on Barnwell, so I think that that's something we need to look at and then figure out what we can do as a community to pick up the difference and pick up the gap. But I think that we need to have bicycle lanes that go to the parks and from the schools.
All right, Peachtree Corners has many sidewalks on both sides of their streets. Barnwell and Nesbitt Roads just have sporadic sections of sidewalks, and yet we have an elementary school and a national park on Barnwell. Rumblow Road has sidewalks aplenty. Where are our sidewalks? When will we get sidewalks down Barnwell Road and down the city side of Nesbitt Ferry Road? And the more general one was, where do you see a need for more bike lanes and sidewalks?
Yes, that's a question that I'm getting for most of the residents when I'm doing the door-to-door campaign. Unlike someone said, the residents of Johns Creek doesn't support sidewalks. That's a wrong statement. Most of the residents want sidewalks. And we're working on that one. So we want all the sidewalks to be connected so that we can walk around. And the bike lanes. If you go back and look at the T-Splosh 2, we set aside $26 million for the bike sidewalks. It's a big number. So once we get that approved, we can do a lot more. We can connect all the sidewalks. We should be getting to a point where an individual, any resident, can walk from one point of the city to the other point on the sidewalk if they wish. So the bike lanes also the same aspect too. So yes, the T-Splosh 2 is there. We will work on that one. But residents do want both sidewalks and the bike lanes. So I would support that. Thank you.
Okay, looking now at small businesses. In the context of economic development of the City of Johns Creek, please elaborate on how you will encourage growth through actions that reinforce support for small business owners operating in a free market.
I like the question because I have both the backgrounds, small business owner and the finance. So the way we have to do it is, if we drive around the Johns Creek, we can see some of those shopping centers, half empty, struggling. So we need to work with those landlords and see how we can get some life into those shopping centers. Small steps, just add a fountain, put a green space around that one, so that small businesses will come back. So it's a win-win situation for the landlord and even for us too. So once we do that one, we are attracting the small business owners into the shopping centers, and that will give like the family to just like same thing, drawing into the sidewalks. Once the sidewalks are connected, the shopping centers are all interconnected to the residents. So in the evening, they can just come out, get their dog, walk to the shopping center, spend some time in there, grab a beer, or get the kids to grab an ice cream, and spouses can do the shopping. So it has to be a life in the shopping centers. That's what I'm going to work on. That would, going back to the same topic before, shifting some of the tax burden from residents onto the small business owners. So we need to create an environment where people will come back and say, you know what, I would want to move into Johns Creek. This is a business-friendly environment. So yes, I'll work on that one. Those would be my priority to bring more businesses into Johns Creek. Thank you.
Okay, Lee. In the context of economic development of the City of Johns Creek, please elaborate upon how you will encourage growth through actions that reinforce support of the small business owners operating in a free market.
So I think first and foremost, we have to hire the best economic development person. Right now, we've just recently lost ours. And so, we need to be on the hunt for somebody who is star quality that can, again, begin to drive business back. Some of the things that we can do, especially during COVID, I don't think we did our small businesses any favor by making the permitting process very difficult for them. It's one of the things I hear most often when I'm talking to local business owners. They're like, on a Saturday, it would have been great for us to be able to have our tables set out front so that people could still, if we couldn't have people in the dining rooms, that we could sit them out on the sidewalks or in the parking lot. And so a lot of other cities did that. And so it supported those local businesses so that they didn't have to shut their doors. And so I feel like that was something that we could have done, as well as we can continue to reduce some of the fees that they have to pay. And so we have to show them that we care, that we want them here. Shortening the process for getting some type of a permit, because a lot of times if they want to just do something special out in the parking lot, they have the permitting process is very lengthy. And so being able to make sure that we support them by, reducing the fees where we can. Like I said before, one of the ways we can reduce traffic is by giving them, reducing the occupational fee tax for some of our businesses, as well as reducing the permitting fees for some of the targeted businesses. And so I think that's the way we give some incentives to drive them here. But it starts with hiring the best economic development person, because they will know, because they're the expert in this, and they will know exactly what we need to do to drive the business and bring the businesses in that look like what we want them to look like in Johns Creek, that they're high capacity, high income jobs. And so that's what we need, is a good economic development person that can drive that business here and give us the type and structures of businesses that we want. Thank you.
Okay, Lee, we're going back to a question about policing. With the issues addressing policing throughout the nation last year, what is your position on the current state of the Johns Creek Police Force, the new police chief, and the training of the officers?
So I'm a huge fan of the police. I'm probably the only person here who's lived with a police officer. So I've got a different perspective than probably most people here. And so our Johns Creek police officers do an amazing job. So hats off to them. They do a phenomenal job. Our police chief is, having to rebuild and repair the rapport with our police officers and rebuild a department. And he's doing a good job at that. I'm not a fan of defund the police. And again, just for the record, nobody wants to do that. And so I know that that's a rumbling thing that's out there, but nobody that I know that's running for city council is interested in defunding the police. And so I think that's something we need to make sure we put on the table, is that we all want a safe community. We all want police officers to protect us, and they have to do that by making sure that they have the training, and it starts there. And so making sure that they have every possible avenue to provide them with the things that they need. And so, like I said, when you send your police officer out, you want to make sure that they come home at the end of the night. And so you want to make sure that they're ready, they're capable, they feel safe, they feel secure, and that they have every single tool that they need in their bag. And right now, some of them often don't feel like they've got the training when it comes to certain situations. And so as it relates to Johns Creek particularly, we got to make sure that training is consistent and timely. We do a great job, but things happen often. Again, COVID, none of us expected COVID. How do the police officers being trained during COVID, how to interact with suspects during COVID? All those things happen, and so we have to consistently train, not just once a year, but consistently over the course of the year, because different things happen. New weapons come out, different tactics that criminals are doing, and so our police officers need to constantly be updated on what that looks like and what the constant threat is that's after them. And so we need to make sure that they're prepared consistently and constantly. Thank you.
Okay, Dilip. With the issues addressing policing throughout the nation last year, what is your position on the current state of the Johns Creek Police Force, the new police chief, and the training of the officers?
Thank you, Anne. I went through that Citizens Police Academy. If you haven't done that, you need to go through that program. That's when you realize what the officers are going through every day. They're walking into the situations. So that's a good program. So there's a reason we are the safest city. They're doing their job. They are the best officers in there. Yes, providing the training and giving them the tools. So we would never pull back on any request that should come from the police department. So we got to sit with the chief and say, okay, you are doing the best service to the community. So what else we can do? What can we do to support you? Both from the funding point of view and the support point of view from the council. So I would support that and work with the police chief and provide whatever tools and support they need from the council side. Thank you.
Okay, and a final one on that same topic. What are your thoughts about the use of deadly force by police officers? When a suspect suddenly points a gun at a police officer, do you believe the officer is justified in using deadly force?
Interesting question. Because while going through that, the program, Citizens Police Academy, we go through the simulations of. So we always tend to react in the wrong way. But look at the officers. They only have a split second. Because when we were going through the training, like we were making a lot of mistakes. Because we are not trained for that. The police officers have the training. They walk into the situations every day. Imagine the family of the officer sitting home and waiting every night. So they go through a lot. Using the deadly force at that point, they only have a split second to react, either their life or the perpetrator's life. So yes, we need to provide them more training on, okay, what are the signs that you need to read for, okay? Is it really like harming you? So they only have so much time to react. So if we need to provide them with more training to handle that kind of situations, yes, we should provide those things. Yes, our police department has so many certifications. They go through a lot. They go through the training. So that is a situation that none of us can imagine. So it's the officer who is walking into that situation. So we cannot sit on this side and judge them. So we should give them the training and the tools needed and let them do their job. Thank you.
Okay. Lee, what are your thoughts about the use of deadly force by police officers? When a suspect suddenly points a gun at a police officer, do you believe the officer is justified in using deadly force?
Again, my perspective is going to be different because I've lived with a police officer. So the conversations that we have at home at a dinner table are quite different than what you may hear out here. And so first and foremost, when we're talking about deadly force, because this is a question that comes up, and unfortunately it's a conversation that we've had to have at home far too often. As soon as something happens, I'm like, all right, what's your thought? Was it a good kill, bad kill? What do you feel? And so we have that conversation, and often the first response is that deadly force isn't always necessary at the beginning. And so while they do only have a split second, a lot of times those situations can be de-escalated. And so making sure that they're trained on de-escalation. But again, if our police officers are put in a situation where they have to use deadly force, then they need that option. However, what he will tell you is that it's not always the first option, and it doesn't have to be the first option. And often what we find is that when you're dealing with particular subsets, the trigger is more often pulled. And so a lot of times that we have to deal with certain situations because people feel like all of a sudden people are superhuman and that they're going to be stronger, faster. And so when you deal with that, the police officers will tell you, like, look, if I'm not equipped to run, or I know that I've got a bad knee and that I can't run. And so a lot of those things play into effect when you're talking about, am I going to kill? Am I going to go for the leg? There are different options. And so often it's like, do we go for a taser? Who's here? So, and again, all these things go into who's here with me for my backup. Is this a new officer? Is this a rookie? All those things play key factors in whether or not it becomes deadly force, because all those things are running through their head. Who's with me? Where's my support? Where's the nearest backup? All of those things play a part in whether or not that decision is made to pull the trigger. But more often than not, if they have to use deadly force, they need the option to do so, because not every person is there to keep our officers safe. So they need that option.
Okay. Switching back to a perhaps simpler topic, please comment on how your personal and professional experience will be beneficial to you if you were elected to the City Council.
So, for those of you who didn't hear earlier, I've been in leadership roles for years, probably 14, and so I'm used to dealing with a multi-million-dollar budget. I'm used to dealing with employees, and I'm used to having to work across the aisle regardless of what standing somebody is. And so I think that that's the biggest part, is making sure that you have people in leadership who are willing to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table.